I couldn't afford anything flashier, but I hadn't expected her words to cut so deep.
It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a wedding. My sister was about to marry the love of her life, and everyone gathered to witness the joyous occasion. But as I stepped into the church, a tight knot formed in my stomach. The room was filled with lavish dresses, expensive suits, and glittering accessories. And then there was me standing at the edge, wearing a simple, unassuming suit. The thought of my wife's reaction had been gnawing at me all morning. I'd known she'd have something to say. She always did. The decision wasn't about the money, it was about practicality. I couldn't afford anything flashier, but I hadn't expected her words to cut so deep. As I adjusted my tie and scanned the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that today would change everything. What I hadn't anticipated was how much those few words from her would sting. I had always prided myself on being practical, someone who understood what was important and what wasn't. So when it came to my sister's wedding, the decision to wear a simple suit seemed obvious. The wedding itself was a grand affair, the kind that would demand expensive attire, but the truth was, I simply couldn't afford it. My job wasn't paying enough to cover luxuries, and we were just scraping by. The mortgage, car payments, and the ever-growing list of bills had drained most of our savings. There was no room for a designer suit. The suit I wore wasn't bad. In fact, it was quite decent. A black, well-tailored number that fit just right, with a white shirt and a tie I'd worn to a few other occasions. It was respectable, functional, and appropriate. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, I just wanted to blend in, to show up and be there for my sister, as a brother should. But I knew my wife wouldn't see it that way. She always cared about appearances. She was one of those people who saw a wedding as a chance to showcase not just the love between two people, but also the display of wealth and status. I knew she would criticize my choice, but deep down, I convinced myself it didn't matter. It was a wedding, not a fashion show. Yet, as the day drew closer, my doubts grew. Would my simple suit be enough for her? As we stepped into Grand Hall, I immediately felt the weight of my own insignificance. The chandeliers hung like glittering stars above a sea of perfectly groomed guests. The women shimmered in floor-length gowns, their jewelry gleaming under the soft lighting, while the men looked as if they'd just walked off the pages of a high-end magazine, tailored suits, polished shoes, and every detail meticulously in place. And then there was me, standing at the edge, in my simple black suit, trying my best not to stand out. I could feel the eyes on me, not in a curious way, but more like a silent judgment. I wasn't one of them. It was in the way the whispers hushed as I walked by, the way I saw people glance at my outfit, then quickly look away. My wife, on the other hand, was effortlessly perfect in her elegant dress, her confidence radiating. But as I glanced at her, I could tell that she, too, noticed my suit and the subtle looks of disapproval from those around us. I wanted to disappear, to blend into background. But the moment I saw my wife's expression, a mix of frustration and barely contained mockery, I realized that I wasn't just out of place in the crowd. I was out of place in my own marriage. It didn't take long for her words to come. The first time she glanced at me, her eyes narrowed. "Really?" she whispered, barely audible but sharp enough to sting. "This is what you chose to wear to her wedding? You couldn't afford better." I froze, the words sinking deeper than I expected. I had tried to convince myself that I didn't care about her opinion. I had tried to tell myself that today wasn't about appearances, it was about family. But standing there in front of her, the reality of the situation hit me hard. I forced a smile. "It's fine, isn't it? Just a wedding," I replied, trying to brush it off, hoping to move past the uncomfortable moment. But she wasn't done. Throughout the ceremony, and even during the reception, every time she caught my eye, there was a look of quiet disapproval. I could see her glancing at the other guests, their expensive outfits, their perfect haircuts, and then back at me in my simple suit. It was as if my choice to be practical, to be modest, was a direct affront to everything she valued. I tried to stay calm, but the longer the day dragged on, the more I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. Later, in a quiet moment when the guests were mingling, I turned to her. "What's your problem with my suit?" I asked, my voice low but steady. "You knew I couldn't afford anything fancy. Why does it matter so much?" Her response was immediate, almost offensive. "It's not just the suit," she said, her tone cold. "It's the fact that you didn't even try. This was a special day for your sister, and you couldn't even make an effort to look decent." I felt the sting of her words, but it wasn't just a suit anymore. I realized she wasn't just disappointed in my choice of clothing. She was disappointed in me. And that realization hit me harder than anything she'd said about my suit. I couldn't help but think back to when we first met, when none of this seemed important. Back then, our relationship was built on understanding, compromise, and a shared vision of the future. We didn't have much. In fact, we had nothing but each other and the dream of building something together. I remember how we would laugh off our financial struggles, making jokes about eating ramen noodles for dinner and celebrating with a cheap bottle of wine. It didn't matter. We had love, and that was enough. There were no designer clothes or extravagant vacations back then, just our time and our promises. When we got married, we didn't have a grand ceremony. Instead, we had a small, intimate gathering with close friends and family. And even though we were stretched thin financially, I remember her telling me that it wasn't the wedding that mattered, it was the love we shared, the life we were going to build together. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. As we moved into our new house and started building careers, her perspective shifted. She started caring more about appearances, about how others perceived us. The small things that used to bring us joy, like a night in watching movies or cooking dinner together, started to feel insignificant compared to the things we needed to show the world that we had it all. I noticed a subtle shift in her attitude, but I didn't say anything at first. It was easier to let it slide. Now, standing there at my sister's wedding, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Somewhere, we'd lost a connection that once made us inseparable. It wasn't about the suit. It was about how we had changed and how we'd stopped seeing eye to eye. By the time the reception was in full swing, I had reached my breaking point. The harsh remarks from my wife had become unbearable. Every smile she flashed, every casual comment she made about my unfortunate outfit, chipped away at something inside me. I knew she had high standards, but it felt like I was nothing more than a disappointment to her. Then, as we sat at the table, surrounded by relatives and friends, I heard her mutter once more under her breath, "I just don't get why you didn't make an effort. It's not like it's asking much." Her words were the final straw. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The eyes of the guests flicked toward us, but I didn't care. I turned to her and spoke in a voice I had tried to keep calm all day. "You think it's about the suit, don't you?" I asked. "It's not. It's never been about the suit. It's about me not being enough for you." Her face froze, and the room went quiet. I had said it aloud, the truth that had been simmering inside me for months. My heart was racing, but a strange sense of clarity washed over me. The tension between us, the unspoken dissatisfaction, was finally out in the open. Something had to change, and I was done pretending it didn't matter. After the reception, we left the wedding early, the silence in the car thick and heavy. Once we got home, the dam finally broke. "Why does it always feel like you're looking for reasons to be disappointed in me?" I asked, the frustration of months, maybe years, finally spilling out. "It's not just a suit, is it? It's everything. You've changed, and I don't even know who you are anymore." She stared at me, speechless for a moment, then sighed. "I didn't mean to make you feel that way. It's not just the clothes, but the fact that you don't seem to care about how we look or what people think anymore. We've worked hard to get here, and I guess I thought you'd care more about keeping up appearances." I listened closely, hearing the cracks in her voice. It wasn't just about status, it was fear. Fear of losing what we had. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting against her words. I was fighting against the growing distance between us. The conversation lingered long into the night, filled with quiet moments of reflection. We both realized that what had been missing wasn't the suit, the clothes, or the wedding. It was a deeper understanding of each other's fears and expectations. My wife wasn't just upset about appearances. She was afraid that we had lost touch with who we were, where we came from. She wanted to feel secure, to feel that our hard work mattered in the eyes of others. And I had become so focused on practical survival that I neglected the importance of showing her that I cared about our image, our future, and even the small things that brought us joy. We agreed to work through this. Together, it wouldn't be easy, but we were willing to try. The simple suit had revealed something far deeper, a chance to rebuild and remember why we had fallen in love in the first place.